Hey leaders, thanks so much for watching again. It's everybody's favorite time of the week. I've got Megan with me again to hopefully provide some comedic relief, but the first few times you were with me, nothing really funny happened. And so this is the third try. We're gonna give it a shot again, so hopefully we can make some comedy happen, you think? Good talk. So hopefully you're watching this video on our brand new Lead Small app. And we talked about this last Sunday night or 2 Sunday nights ago. It's got some really great tools for us to use as leaders. And if you are not watching this on the app, you are missing out on some really great tools and stuff to download right to your phone. So I encourage you to download the app, get our custom content for Proximity. It's really good stuff on the Lead Small app. Talk to me if you need information on how to get connected in with that. And we've also been talking about the past couple of weeks, the 7 non-negotiable characteristics of spiritual leaders. These are the 7 most important things for us as leaders to keep in check as we seek to influence and inspire the next generation together. The third one, and we did 1 and 2, third one is wisdom. And the scripture that goes along with that is James 1:5, and it's one that's been near and dear to my heart. It says, if any of you lacks wisdom, you should ask God, who gives generously to all without finding fault, and it will be given to you. This has been a verse that I've also had to cling to as a leader, and what a promise that is. And there have been many times that I needed wisdom as I was growing as a leader. And so that verse is really true for my life, and God has called us to wisdom. So as leaders, I feel that we need to be doing as much as possible to learn, and that means going to conferences, reading books, not being afraid to meet people and to learn from people who aren't like us. And they might even know more than you know. So what are you personally doing right now to grow and develop yourself as a leader, to add to your wisdom? For me personally, I'm in the process of connecting with other church leaders and school leaders and school leaders and teachers and principals. In the past several weeks, I've been involved in numerous learning environments with people who know so much more than me, and God has used each experience to shape me in an awesome way as I continue to gain wisdom from those people that God puts in my life and just the different opportunities God puts in my life. So I encourage you, seek wisdom as a spiritual leader in our students' lives. Now this week, we are in week 3 of Stepping Up, and the whole idea behind it and the whole intro thought is it's frustrating being asked or told to do something that we can't understand or fully explain. When we can't see the why behind it, it gets frustrating. You've most likely had this happen with your parents when you were a teenager. You've had this happen with teachers and coaches. And this Sunday night is all about this fact, that there will be times in your life when this will happen with God. Maybe you didn't actually hear God say something, but many of us have had those moments where we listened to someone speak at church or read a Bible verse or heard a friend or family member talk about something that was in the Bible, and we thought, I'm not sure, but it seems to be coming right from God to me. And maybe that it was something that God was asking us to do, a way he was asking us to live, or a thing that God might be asking us to avoid, or a goal that God's asking us to go for. But whatever it is, chances are when we encounter that thing that just jumps off the page, we run into 2 really big obstacles. The first thing is it doesn't seem to make sense. We don't see the point. We didn't understand how doing this would benefit us. So the second obstacle we run into is no one else might be doing this. We felt all alone and going along with what God asks of us sometimes, even if we weren't literally the only ones. In fact, we realize that the cool and popular thing to do sometimes is to do the opposite of what God tells us to do. And that's a tension. That's a struggle when these things jump off the page for us. Whether it's partying or dating or apologizing, you may feel like God's way is getting kind of old and you're getting impatient and wondering if you can really trust God in some of these areas. Now, the bad news is we've all been there or will at some point in our lives, and some of our teenagers or maybe even you might be there right now in one way or another. But here's the good news. It's okay. You don't need to feel guilty about it. You don't need to be afraid to talk about it. And you aren't the only one that feels that way. In fact, let's just break the tension and all just say the phrase, God's way seems crazy sometimes. It's okay. We promise you're not hurting God's feelings. God gets it. And here's the cool thing. Joshua, the guy we've been talking about for the past couple of weeks, had a moment where he found himself in a similar position, probably feeling the same way. And I think we have a lot to learn from him today. Because yes, Joshua felt the same things that we feel, and he learned something about God that I think could be a game changer for us. It's something that will help us understand God more and trust him when he asks us to do things that we might just feel a little bit are crazy. Now, where we're going to pick up the story is where we left off last week. Joshua has just taken over for Moses. He's leading the people of Israel into the promised land, and the time has come to step up. So they cross the river into the land. They're ready to go, but there's just one problem. Jericho, a big fortified city with giant walls around it, stood in their way. And the big question was, how are we going to conquer an armed city with giant walls around it? Now, if you had to guess, what kind of a plan do you think an ordinary, rational person would come up with? Bring on the heavy artillery, right? Joshua probably had the very same idea. But then it came time for God to give them the battle plan, and here is what God said. He said, "Then the Lord said to Joshua, 'See, I have delivered Jericho into your hands, along with its kings and fighting men. March around the city once with all the armed men. Do this for 6 days. Have 7 priests carry trumpets of ram horns in front of the ark. On the 7th day, march around the city 7 times with the priests blowing the trumpets. When you hear them sound a long blast of the trumpets, have the whole army give a loud shout.'" Now, can you imagine what the Israelites were thinking? You want us to walk, to just walk around the city, and not just today, but for the next week, and then you want us to play some loud music and yell. Are you kidding? Like, God, I know you're busy, so maybe you haven't thought this one through. The way you conquer a city is with weapons and ladders and catapults and stuff like that. There's no way what you're asking us to do is going to work. I don't get it, God. Plus, can you imagine, God, how much the guys inside of the wall are going to laugh at us? It's going to be so embarrassing. You have to be kidding me. But I love what Joshua does. He doesn't let the craziness or uncertainty or unlikeliness of it keep him from doing it. Even when the people of Israel were thinking that the new leader has lost his mind, Joshua stepped up and did what God asked him to do. I can imagine Joshua's out there going, keep walking, keep walking. I know this sounds crazy, but trust God, keep walking. And then this is what happens. Scripture tells us when the trumpet sounded, the army shouted. And at the sound of the trumpet, when the men gave a loud shout, the wall collapsed. So everyone charged straight in. And they took the city easily. It actually worked. They walked and kept walking, and on the 7th day, God tore down the walls. And in that moment, Joshua and the people of Israel learned 2 really important things about the God we obey. God knows what he's doing. God doesn't need our advice, and he doesn't need help. God knows. This was true for Joshua and the Israelites when God told them what to do in warfare, and the same thing is true for us. God knows what he's doing in your life. And the second thing, we just need to keep walking. The role of the Hebrew people was simply to keep walking, keep trusting, keep obeying God, keep doing what God tells you to do, keep living like God says, and the same is true for us. We can trust what God asks us to do, and don't give up because it's taking too long, because you can't see the outcome yet, or because it seems too crazy. When you do what God asks you to do, you won't regret it. God knows what he's doing, so keep walking. This whole story may sound strange because we don't have a walled city that we're trying to get into right now, but that would be really cool, but we don't. But we don't have literal walls, but we do have things in our lives that are like these types of giants in our lives, things that we think we may know how to handle, but that God may be asking us to handle differently. Maybe God's asking you to march when it comes to how you treat your stepmom, or for our teenagers when it comes to how you treat your stepmom, or for our teenagers when they take that test, when you handle someone offending you, or how you have fun on the weekends. Maybe God's asking you to trust him and do some things a little bit differently. And it may seem crazy when you realize what God is asking you to do. It may sound a bit crazy as walking around a wall, but it doesn't mean we don't do it. We have no idea what hangs in the balance when we decide to partner with God. You have no idea what might come out of your consistent obedience to God's calling in your life. We'll have no idea what we're missing if we quit. Now, more than 1,000 years later, Jesus came on the scene and said this. He said, "I have come that I may have, or that you may have life, and that you may live it to the fullest." God and Jesus want you to live a full life, a life where you step up, a life of epic proportions. And do you know how you get there? You start by listening to what God is calling you to do. You start by listening to the God who made this life to begin with. There's no telling what might be waiting for us, but we have to keep walking. We have to keep obeying. We have to keep persevering. You have to keep trusting God and doing what he says and stepping up into those moments. God knows what he's doing, so keep walking. It's a beautiful message as we end our Stepping Up series of this idea that God calls us to step up and do big things. And when we don't see the why or the how behind it, God knows what he's doing, so keep walking. Now this week we'll see at 4:45 in our lobby for our small group leader huddle. We hope you have a great week, and if you're out at the Seminole or out at the 360 United campus, we will see you out there in the morning as well. So have a great week, guys. We'll see you later. Bye.